I didn't believe in haunted objects until something in my apartment started paying attention to me. Not watching, not moving, learning. It began with a simple doll my friend gave me as a joke. But within days, it wasn't just changing positions. It was responding, leaving notes, saying my name. And the worst part is, I don't know when it stopped being just a doll. If you think this is just another creepy story, stay with me. Because by the end of this, you might start questioning the things in your own room that never seem to move, until you're not looking. I wasn't looking for anything strange to happen to me. At the time, my life was about as normal as it gets. I was living alone in a small one-bedroom apartment just outside Columbus, working a steady job, keeping to myself. My routine didn't change much. Work, home, maybe a drink on the weekend, repeat. I wasn't the kind of person who believed in haunted objects or anything like that. Honestly, I didn't think about stuff like that at all. That's why what happened didn't feel like a horror story at first. It felt like something small, something explainable. It started with the doll. My friend Lisa gave it to me. She stopped by one afternoon, laughing before she even got through the door. She had this old, worn-looking raggedy doll tucked under her arm like it was some kind of joke she couldn't wait to land. "I found this at a yard sale," she said, holding it up. "Tell me this doesn't belong in your apartment." I remember rolling my eyes. "Why would I want that?" "Because it's creepy," she said, smiling. "And you live alone. It'll keep you company." I laughed, took it from her, and set it on the kitchen counter without really thinking about it. It wasn't heavy, just cloth and stuffing. Old, faded fabric, yarn hair, a stitched smile that didn't quite sit right on its face. It wasn't scary, just off. That's the best way I can explain it. The eyes were the first thing I noticed. Not right away, but later, when Lisa had already left and the apartment was quiet again. I was making coffee, moving around like I always did, but every time I passed the counter, I caught myself glancing at it. The doll wasn't doing anything. It was just sitting there. But the way its eyes were stitched, they looked focused, like they weren't just facing forward, but actually fixed on something. On me. I told myself I was being stupid. I picked it up, turned it around, even laughed a little under my breath. "Yeah, okay," I said out loud, like that settled it. Then I carried it into the living room and dropped it into a chair near the window, out of the way. That should have been the end of it. But that night, when I went to bed, I couldn't shake the feeling that something in the apartment had changed. Nothing obvious, no sounds, no movement, just a difference in the air. Like when someone else is in the room with you, even if they're not saying anything. I remember lying there on my back, staring at the ceiling, listening to the quiet. My bedroom door was open, just enough that I could see part of the living room through the gap. I could see the chair, and I knew the doll was sitting in it. I didn't get up to check. I told myself it was just because I wasn't used to having something like that in the apartment, that my brain was filling in the silence with something it didn't understand. Eventually, I rolled over and forced myself to sleep. At least, I think I did, because the next thing I remember, I was awake again. It was dark, darker than before. The kind of darkness you get when it's the middle of the night and everything feels heavier somehow. I didn't know what time it was. I didn't reach for my phone. I just lay there. And that feeling was still there, stronger now, like I wasn't alone. I kept my eyes open, staring toward the door, but I didn't move. I didn't call out. I didn't sit up. I just listened. There was nothing. No footsteps, no breathing, no sound at all. And still, I couldn't shake it. After a while, I told myself I was being ridiculous, that it was just my mind playing tricks on me, that I needed to go back to sleep. So I closed my eyes. And this is the part that still bothers me the most. I don't remember falling asleep. There's no transition, no moment where I drifted off. It's like my memory just cuts. 1 second I'm lying there fully awake. The next, it's morning. Sunlight coming through the window. Everything quiet, normal again. I got up, went through my routine, didn't think much about it, at least not right away. I walked into the living room, heading for the kitchen, and that's when I noticed it. The chair by the window was empty. I stopped. I was sure I'd left the doll there. I hadn't touched it after Lisa left. I hadn't gone back into the living room before bed. But now it wasn't there. I stood there for a second, trying to remember if I'd moved it without thinking. Maybe I'd picked it up, set it somewhere else, and just forgot. It happens. I checked the kitchen first. Nothing. Then I turned around, and that's when I saw it. The doll was sitting on the couch, not tossed there, not fallen, sitting upright, facing the hallway, facing my bedroom. I stared at it longer than I probably should have. Then I shook my head, let out a breath, and walked over, picking it up like it was nothing. "Okay," I muttered. "Guess I moved you." I set it back on the chair by the window, exactly where it had been before. Same position, same angle. I even adjusted it slightly, making sure it was centered, just to prove a point to myself. Then I went about my day, told myself it didn't mean anything. And for most of that morning, I believed it. It wasn't that I thought the doll was alive. It was that I couldn't prove it wasn't. It was that I couldn't prove it wasn't. I tried to treat it like nothing had happened. That's the part I keep coming back to, how hard I worked to stay normal. I went to work, answered emails, made small talk with coworkers like I always did. I didn't tell anyone about the doll moving. Even in my own head, I kept it simple. I must have moved it. I just don't remember. That explanation held for about a day. That night, before I went to bed, I stood in the living room for a while, just looking at it. The doll was still in the chair by the window, exactly where I'd left it that morning. Same angle, same position. I don't know why, but I pulled out my phone and took a picture. It felt stupid, paranoid even, but I wanted something solid, something I could check in the morning and laugh about. "See," I said quietly to myself, "nothing's changing." I went to bed after that, leaving the door open again without really thinking about it. Sleep didn't come easy. I kept waking up, little half-wakes where I wasn't fully conscious, but aware enough to feel that same pressure in the room, that same sense that something was just there. At one point, I thought I heard something. Not a voice, not a footstep, just a soft, dragging sound, like fabric brushing against the floor. I opened my eyes, staring toward the doorway, but everything looked the same. Dark, still. I didn't get up. I didn't want to. Eventually, I must have fallen asleep again, because the next thing I knew, my alarm was going off. Morning, light pouring in, everything normal. I grabbed my phone, still half asleep, and the first thing I did, without even thinking about it, was open the photo I'd taken the night before. The doll was in the chair, exactly where it should be. For a second, I felt relieved. Then I walked into the living room and stopped. The chair was empty. The doll was sitting on the floor, closer to the hallway this time, closer to my bedroom. I didn't move right away. I just stood there, phone still in my hand, staring at it. I looked back down at the photo, then back at the doll, then back at the photo again. It didn't make sense. I checked the time on the image, late the night before. I hadn't gotten up after that. I was sure of it. No memory of it, no reason to. Still, there it was, on the floor, facing me. I forced out a breath and walked over, crouching down to pick it up. "Okay," I said, quieter this time. "That's not funny." I don't know who I was talking to. I set it back in the chair again, adjusting it just like before. Precise, centered, like I was trying to lock it into place. Then I did something I hadn't done before. I angled my phone toward it and hit record. I left it running on the coffee table, pointed directly at the chair. "If I moved it," I muttered, "this'll show it." That made me feel better, more in control, like I was finally approaching this logically. I went to work that day with that thought in my head, repeating it like it was enough to settle everything. But something else started to creep in. Something I didn't expect. When I got home that evening, I knew something was wrong before I even turned on the lights. It was the silence. Not the normal kind. This felt heavier, like the air had been sitting still for too long. I locked the door behind me, dropped my keys on the counter, and stood there for a second, listening. Nothing. Then I walked into the living room. The phone was still on the coffee table, still recording. The doll was still in the chair. For a moment, everything looked exactly the way I'd left it, and I almost laughed. I actually felt embarrassed, like I'd spent an entire day building something up in my head for no reason. I picked up my phone, stopped the recording, and sat down on the couch. "See?" I said under my breath. "Nothing." Then I noticed the paper. It was sitting on the table, right where my phone had been. A small piece, torn from something, folded once. I frowned, reaching for it slowly. I didn't remember leaving anything there. I hadn't written anything down before I left. I unfolded it, and for a second my brain didn't process what I was looking at. It was handwriting, uneven, childlike, like someone who was still learning how to form letters. There were only 2 words. "Are you awake?" I just stared at it. My first thought wasn't fear, it was confusion. I looked around the apartment, half expecting to find something out of place. An open window, a door unlocked, something that would explain how someone got in. Everything was exactly as it should be. I checked the locks anyway. Front door, secure. Windows, closed. Nothing disturbed. I went back to the table, picking up the note again, turning it over like there'd be something else on the back. There wasn't. Just those 2 words. "Are you awake?" I swallowed, my mouth suddenly dry. Then slowly, without meaning to, I looked up. At the chair, at the doll. It hadn't moved, not that I could see. Still sitting there, still facing forward. But something about it felt different. Not the position, the attention. Like it wasn't just there anymore. Like it was waiting. I don't know how long I stood there, just holding that piece of paper, staring at it, trying to think of a rational explanation. A prank. That's what it had to be. Lisa. It had to be Lisa. I grabbed my phone and called her immediately. She picked up on the second ring. "Hey, what's up?" "Did you come into my apartment today?" I asked. There was a pause. "What? While I was at work, did you come over?" "No," she said, a little sharper now. "Why would I do that?" "There's a note here," I said, "on my table. You didn't—" "I don't have a key," she cut in. "You never gave me one." That was true. I felt my chest tighten slightly. "Then how—" "I didn't do anything," she said, and now there was something else in her voice. Not joking, not amused, concern. "Is everything okay?" I looked back at the doll, at the way it was sitting there, facing me, holding my attention without moving. "Yeah," I said, even though it didn't feel true anymore. "Yeah, I just thought maybe you were messing with me." "I'm not," she said. "That's not funny." "I know," I said quietly. We hung up a few seconds later, and I stayed standing there in the living room, the note still in my hand. It wasn't just moving anymore. It was responding. I didn't sleep that night. Not really. I lay in bed with the lights off, staring at the ceiling, the note still sitting on my nightstand where I could see it if I turned my head just a little. I kept telling myself I was overreacting, that there was a logical explanation I just hadn't found yet. But the problem was, nothing about it felt random anymore. The first time the doll moved, I could explain it away. The second time, it was harder, but still possible. The note changed that, because something had decided to write that, and it had left it where I would find it. Sometime after midnight, I must have drifted into something like sleep. Not deep, not real sleep, just that thin state where your body shuts down, but your mind stays halfway awake. That's when I heard it. A sound I hadn't heard before. Not the dragging noise from the night before. This was softer, closer, like something small shifting its weight. I didn't open my eyes. I couldn't. Every instinct I had told me not to move. The room felt occupied. That's the only word I have for it. Not just watched, occupied. like something was there with me, sharing the space, breathing the same air. I listened. The sound came again, a faint, uneven pressure against the floor. Then, nothing. Silence. But it wasn't empty silence. It felt like something had stopped because it knew I was awake. That thought hit me so suddenly I almost reacted to it. Almost sat up, almost turned my head. But I didn't. I stayed completely still, eyes closed, breathing slow, like I was pretending to be asleep for something that might be watching. And then I heard it. My name. Soft. Quiet. But wrong. Not the way people normally say it. The rhythm was off, like someone trying to repeat it without understanding how it's supposed to sound. It came from somewhere near the foot of my bed. I felt my chest tighten, but I forced myself not to move. A few seconds passed. Then again. My name. A little clearer this time. Closer. I don't know how long I lay there like that, listening, waiting for something worse to happen. But nothing did. Eventually, the pressure in the room eased. That heavy feeling lifted. And I must have passed out after that, because the next thing I remember is sunlight coming through the window again. Morning. Everything looked normal. Too normal. For a moment, I almost convinced myself I dreamed it. That the voice, the movement, it was all just my mind trying to process the stress. Then I sat up and saw the doll. It wasn't in the living room. It was in my bedroom, sitting on the floor, right beside my bed, facing me. I froze. My heart didn't race like you'd expect. It just slowed, like my body didn't know how to respond to what I was seeing. I hadn't brought it in there. I knew that. There was no version of events where I picked it up in the middle of the night and placed it next to my bed. No memory, no reason. And yet, there it was. I swung my legs over the side slowly, careful not to touch it. The doll didn't move. Of course it didn't. But the feeling was still there, that sense of attention, like it was aware of me in a way objects aren't supposed to be. I stood up, backing away from it, my eyes locked on its face. Okay, I whispered, more to myself than anything. Okay. I didn't finish the thought. I didn't know how. Instead, I grabbed my phone and left the room. I didn't even bother getting dressed right away. I just needed distance. I stood in the kitchen trying to think, trying to piece together something that made sense. But every explanation I came up with collapsed the second I looked back toward the hallway. Because the only thing waiting at the end of it was that. After a few minutes, I forced myself to go back. I wasn't going to let it control how I moved around my own apartment. That's what I told myself. I stepped into the bedroom again, slower this time. The doll was still there, same position, same angle, facing the bed, facing where I'd been lying. I walked over carefully and crouched down in front of it. Up close, it looked exactly the same as it always had. Worn fabric, yarn hair, stitched smile. Nothing alive about it. Nothing that should be able to move, or write, or speak. I reached out and picked it up. For a second, I hesitated, not because I thought it would react, but because I had the sudden, overwhelming feeling that it would remember how I handled it. That whatever this was, it noticed things. I tightened my grip and stood up, carrying it out into the living room. I set it down on the coffee table this time, not the chair, right in front of me, where I could see it. Okay, I said, my voice steady but low. If this is some kind of joke, it's done. The words sounded empty the second they left my mouth, because deep down, I already knew this wasn't a joke. Jokes don't wait. Jokes don't adjust. Jokes don't call your name in the dark. I sat down across from it, elbows on my knees, staring at it like I was expecting an answer. It didn't move. Of course it didn't, but something changed. Not in the room, in me. Because for the first time since this started, I felt something I hadn't let myself feel before. Not confusion, not unease, not even fear. Recognition. Like whatever this was, wasn't just happening around me anymore. It was happening with me. And as I sat there staring at that doll, I realized something I couldn't explain and couldn't take back once it settled in my mind. This thing, whatever it was, wasn't just trying to get my attention. It was learning how to keep it. And that's why I'm telling you this now. Because whatever that thing was, I don't think it ever really needed to stay with me. I think it just needed time. Time to understand, to learn, to recognize what it was looking for. And once it did, it didn't belong to me anymore. So if you ever notice something in your home that feels like it's paying a little too much attention, don't ignore it. Because I did, and I still don't know where it is now. If this story unsettled you even a little, make sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel. There are more real stories like this waiting for you, and trust me, you'll want to hear them before they find you first.